Hello, welcome to Billy's Books. Today we're going to do Isaac Asimov's The Naked Sun. If you're not familiar with Isaac Asimov's writing, he has a lot of books and stories about robots. This is actually the sequel to another one. In my notes, I know what the title of the previous one is, but since I don't have my notes, I forgot what it was. The main character, the protagonist of this book and the one before it is Detective Elijah Bailey from Earth. In this future, Earth is very overpopulated, and they have a few robots. They're so overpopulated that they all live underground, and they all live in really enclosed spaces, such that if one of them were in this car right here, these windows that show all the open space out, that's washed out here, but it's basically, I'm surrounded by a lot of open space for the most part, that would freak them out, because whenever our character, Detective Elijah Bailey, has to go on an airplane or something like that, they always close the windows so he can't see, because he gets agoraphobia. I think that's the right term, agoraphobia, fear of open spaces. So everyone from Earth has that. And they don't have very many robots, and they look down upon robots. However, and in the first book, it was on Earth, and that was the situation. But this time, he's been called back to go to one of the outer planets. And the outer planets, or all the people who live in outer planets, are called spacers. And all the spacers look down upon the Earthlings, because I guess in the past, the rich people left Earth, and the poor people got stuck behind. So they look down on Earthlings. And conversely, all the spacers live in planets where there's very low population and high robot factor. So they have very different cultures, and they both think ill of the others. So this time he's been sent with his friend. In the previous book, he worked with another detective who was a robot that looked like a human, which is rare apparently. That name was Daniel. Or R. Daniel, R for robot. In this book, the two of them go to the distant planet, and Daniel seems to be hiding his robotness, so he takes off the R, and he's just Detective Daniel. And our hero, who's really kind of a jerk, both to robots and the people on these other planets, because he's prejudiced against the spacers and also defensive of the spacers being, so he's kind of a jerk both to the robots by being, deliberately pushing them to the limits of what they can do socially, and he's also just kind of a jerk to the spacers, the people on the planet who he's visiting. So one of the big culture differences between the spacers and the Earthlings is Earthlings are so crowded that they're if you've ever been in New York City, everyone's really close together, and you really have no privacy. And in the previous book, they explore that in great detail. In this one, the spacers have so much, there's so few of them that they actually have very little. It's deliberately meant to be a contrasted opposite. They have almost no human contact. Each one lives in isolation and has lots and lots of robot servants to do everything. So, they have what I guess the equivalent would be, they sort of have holography for communication. So when our hero goes to talk to somebody, he goes to view them, not see them. They have a distinguish on this planet. They distinguish between viewing and seeing, since they all visit each other virtually through video phone, we'll say. They view each other, but seeing is actually the thing where I believe you actually come in physical contact with someone, and that repels them so much so that even married people, they're married by the, or they're sort of chosen by the state, and then I assume it's the reproduction values, but they even when couples see each other, it's really uncomfortable because they're actually repelled by each other, like other human touch grosses them out. And of course our hero, Elijah Bailey, he thinks that's stupid, and so he deliberately sort of forces the issue and wants to go see people, even though they're totally like when the idea of being in the same room with another human being grosses him out. He insists on it all the time because he's kind of a jerk. He's also a jerk to the robots. The robots are obviously meant to be subservient. And in this book, he just calls the robots boy. Boy, do this. Boy, do that. Sound familiar? So, of course they do because they're just machines. He even talks condescendingly to his very smart robot, looking like a human. He makes a distinction between robots are logical but not reasonable. That's the distinction he makes. So as a detective, Daniel, the robot, he keeps saying to the robot, well, you have limited capacity for reason, so that's why you don't understand what I just did with these people. And the robot's like, that may be true, but you are really breaking social norms here, and is that necessary? And so forth it goes. Anyway, I'm only halfway through, me and my plot thing, so I can't accidentally give away the ending. But right now he's doing an investigation and visiting people. He's not just viewing them, but seeing them. And when he was viewing somebody, he was talking to the local detective. The guy was sitting there with his glass of water going, blah, 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 blah. And he just keeps on holding it. And eventually he takes a sip and then goes, and dies right in front of the detective. Of course, through vid screen. So they're trying to figure out if it was a murder or an accident. And our hero is frustrated because the robots immediately, whenever something happens, they immediately clean everything up. So the evidence is destroyed. And of course, our hero suspects maybe robots. But of course, robots have the 3 rules, which if I had my notes, I could recite to you, but I don't, so I won't. But because of some of the things that happen with those rules and plot lines that sort of squeeze between the rules, he creates a number of interesting stories based on what happens if you really put those rules to the limit. And Asimov's process of writing is when he's talking about like logical things that may change, he sort of has them dialogue it out. So he will say to one detective, well, I know that you meant this because you said this and therefore that. And he just sounds everything out because, of course, in case you don't know, Isaac Asimov isn't just a science fiction writer. He's a proper scientist. So he thinks very logically. Anyway, I'm enjoying it. It's kind of an old-fashioned science fiction book from a style from a different era, but it's enjoyable and it's a quick read. And like always, I enjoy these books. I wouldn't review it if I didn't like it. If you can't do, review.
What you gonna do when the satellites drop, when the satellites drop, when the satellites